Welcome back, CSC200 class, to EX7. This is kind of a continuation of EX6, where we just created a SpongeBob database. And this one is kind of a little in between. We're going to do a little practice by entering information in a form that's going to generate on an HTML page. Now, we're not going to connect to our database just yet, but we're going to make sure this will be kind of a first step. So we'll see how this goes. And I have some files in this EX67 folder. We're going to open up index. You can open up both of them if you want, but we only really need index right now because we're making the form. And I already have in the HTML portion, after the headline, the H1, I have a form element here, or form tags that begin and end the form. And just to get a little idea of forms, we're going to go to HTML W3 Schools and scroll down and look at forms. And we're just going to, they have some very simple things here, Mickey Mouse form. If you go to try it yourself, now notice they do mention the form element. And I'll go to the try it yourself just to see what they have. And you can see we have what are called input text fields, these things here, and they have a default size. We can put a size in here, and we're going to enter some names in here to add to our database eventually. Right now for this label where it says first name, they're just putting first name and then a line break and then putting the field underneath it. And this is the field, this whole input type equals text and all that kind of stuff there. And there's even a submit button down here, input type submit, value equals submit, value equals that on top there. So I'm going to do a couple things here. Maybe I'll just copy this whole form. I'm not going to copy the first name. I'll probably delete them, but I'll copy some of this out of here just to start, give us a starting point. And I'll just hit return here and I'll put it here in my form. And I'm going to get rid of this stuff here with the line breaks. And I'll just keep my submit one for now. I don't need the second one even. So I'll just keep two of these, and I'll kind of indent them so they're kind of inside. Well, I know that they're inside our form because they would be kind of a child of the form. And we're actually going to do something called labels on here, but this is so far what we want. Input type equals text, name equals, and we're actually going to use the same name that we used our columns, and I'll just call it first, because we don't need to enter ID. So I'm just going to put first here. And our value, we're not going to put any value because that's a default value. But what we will put, I'll put ID and I'll put first. That will actually be an ID name. So if we need JavaScript to communicate with it, as far as to get a value from there, we may do that. Name will also be important from getting our values too. So we do need name, we do need ID, and we could put a size here. We'll see what it looks like. But we'll start with that, and we'll do first, and that way I can copy this, and our second one will be, and again, the attribute will be text, and the second one will be last, and we'll keep the ID the same. We'll make the IDs and those, even the variables will be the same, and then I'll make one more, or we might have two more. And we could actually do a radio button, but I'm gonna skip the radio button for now. As far as gender, we could do that when we do our other one, but as far as gender, I'm going to leave that out for now, or we'll just have you fill it in. But that would be a good one to do a radio button with when I get a chance to do that. But we'll just leave it as text for now. And after that, it'll be species, and I'll do an ID of species, and input type equals submit. And I don't know if we need name equals submit, but let's just put it in anyway, just to be consistent, even if we don't need it. So I'll put name, and the value submit is going to be what it displays on the button. And we should also put an ID here. And we'll call that submit as well. That'll just be consistent whether we use it or not. We'll have everything in there. So we're basically going to have 3 form fields. Now right now these are just going to be empty, and we're going to do something called labels on them, and we'll see what that looks like. And we'll probably put a kind of paragraph after this. So we're going to put a label. Now, if you're curious about labels, if we go to form elements, you won't see labels unless you get down into the HTML5. That was kind of a new thing. And I'll scroll down because eventually they have label, and it's actually in a list of HTML5 elements. Here it is, label. And they use label 4. And we don't have to necessarily use label 4, although we can try that. I don't think it'll hurt. When I did it, I didn't use label 4, but we could try that. So I'm just going to copy that label 4. And basically what this is, and I guess it says you're supposed to for the 4, you should use the ID that somehow that helps bind them together. I don't know if we need that or not, but we'll throw that in there. And I'll go on top of this one, and I'll put in my label, and it'll be my label for first, and it'll say, you know, first name, and I'll put a colon there. And now that I have that, I'm going to copy that and put it in front of the next one, and this will be labeled for last, and I'll put last name, and I'll paste again, and I'll have label for species. And since I'm capitalizing these, I'll just capitalize species. And I think for that, well, I don't need something here. I'm just gonna, I'll put label for submit. And I'm not gonna put anything in here. I'm just gonna put a non-breaking space. And I think we may need that just to kind of hold things in place, but we'll see what happens. I think when we line things up with CSS, it might help to actually have a label there. So I think we're okay with that. So I'm going to save this. So our index we're going to save. I'll do File, Save. And we'll just take a look at what we have, and we can just do Preview. We'll just do Live Preview. And I'll open this up in a browser. And I'll clear it out of here. I don't want it in here. And here it is. There's what we have so far. And you can see it's kind of out of, we want it stacked. So we're going to put paragraphs after each one of these. So I'll go back and do that, and I'll put p tags here after each one. We could even do line breaks, I guess, would be fine. Let me just put a line break and see if that works before I put p's in there. And I'll save that. And I'll just take a look at it. And that looks a little better, although things aren't lined up. And we're going to line things up a little bit better with some CSS. And I think that's why I actually was using paragraphs, so we could put some kind of spacing in there. So let's take a look at what we have. We have input here. These are all inputs, and maybe we could do something like a margin bottom in our CSS. We have CSS right here, so we'll put margin bottom, and I'll just put 6 pixels for now, and I'll just save that just to see if that helps a little bit. And that looks a little better right now, maybe even 12. Now that I see that. I think that's why I had a paragraph, because it puts that space there automatically. And you can see things are, there's a non-breaking space here, so things aren't lined up, but we're actually going to do something with CSS to kind of line it up, so we could line these up at a certain space, so these things all kind of line up. That's why we put a label here. And I think what I did a label, and I think I put position. This is a CSS thing. And I put absolute. And then I think for these things, I put position relative to where they're at. And then I just kind of move them over. I think from the it looks like they're moving to the right, but I think it's from the left. I think you put from the left. So let me just try that. If I say right, let me just see what happens, because I think this is wrong. But let's see if I just put 200 pixels and move it to the right. I think it's from the left. I think that's why I use the left attribute. But let me just see what happens if I put right. It should be all messed up then. And I don't even see them, so they must be way over there. So let me go back, and I'll change this to left. And I'll save it. And that looks right. Now they look way too far right now. So 200 pixels is way too much. So I'll have to change that, and maybe I'll do it 100. And that looks a little bit better. So that looks okay. And you can see that's why I put a label here, because everything's moving relative to that label. And if I didn't have a label for submit, the submit button would be down here. And I like it over here. So we have first name, last name, species, and I did not put gender. So I forgot to put gender here. And that's easy enough. I'll just copy the species one, this one right here, and I'll just put it before the submit. Then I'll put gender, and everything else in here I'll copy gender. I'll copy it, and I think if you do Command Option or Control Alt, if you double click on here and double click on here, it highlights 2 of them. So if you'd want to type in gender, it does it on all of them. So that's kind kind of a little shortcut, Control Option or Command, or Control Alt, I guess on Windows, Command Option on Mac. And you could kind of highlight multiple things and kind of update multiple things at once. So that's label for gender, and the label would also be gender, but I'll put a capital G here. And I'll save that, just see what it looks like. And that looks a little better. Everything's kind of looks okay. Now, I don't have my colons lined up. I just have this left justified and those there. And I can make everything a little bit bigger if I want. We may adjust the sizing a little bit later, but that's okay. And even gender, we don't need this long. You know, if I wanted to go in here and put a size for gender, I could actually go inside here and put another attribute. I'll just put size equals, let me just put 4 and see how that looks. I think that's okay. I'll save that and see what it looks like. And that looks about right to put in one letter. We'll put in a letter. And again, we might want a radio button eventually to put in there, but we'll start with that. And I'll kind of save what I have. And what we're going to try and do here is enter information and actually just make it display in a table in a PHP form, not actually a form, but have it, we're going to use PHP to kind of interpret this information and put it in a table. So that's the kind of thing that gets run on a server. That's why we're doing it on a server. So we're just putting in our HTML first and making sure this is all ready to go. And then what we're going to do next is have this display A page. That's going to be the page that's going to display our information. So that's going to process our form that we have here. So we have a form, and also a couple things we're going to put in form. We're going to put an action equals, and in quotes, we're actually going to put display A .php, because that's the file that's going to process it. That's going to perform the action. And then we're also going to do method equals post, and we'll talk about that. But this is for putting information somewhere. We want to use post. I don't know what happened here. Let me put quotes here, and method equals post. Something got messed up there. So that looks okay. So action is display A. When the form gets processed, when you hit the submit button, it should run to this page and display the information we need. Now, we don't have that page done yet, so we're going to do that next. But let's just make sure this looks okay, and that's all we need for now. That's our form, and we're going to be able to type stuff in here, so that's all we need. The size may have to be altered a little bit, but that's a good start. So this is part 1 of EX7 SpongeBob Database A, I guess. I'll see what we call it, but that's what we're going to do here. So I'm going to take a break here, and we'll call this part 1, and then we'll move on to part 2, which will be basically filling out the form and having it display in a table.